In the busy city of Techville, in a cozy apartment on the 5th floor, there lived a 10-year-old girl named Zara Khan. Her room was like no other room you had ever seen. It was absolutely, wonderfully, magnificently messy, but in the best way possible. There were copper wires curling like spaghetti across her desk. There were glowing circuit boards stacked like pancakes on her bookshelf. There were tiny motors, blinking LED lights, old clocks taken apart, and 3 different kinds of glue. And right in the middle of all this glorious mess sat Zara, wearing her favorite pair of bright green glowing goggles, humming a song to herself. "Every great invention starts with a great big mess," she would always say. Zara loved building things more than anything else in the world. She had already built a lamp that turned on when she clapped, a robot vacuum cleaner made from an old shoebox, and a small fan powered by a lemon battery. Her mum called her a little genius. Her dad called her a tornado with a screwdriver. Her little brother Bilal called her totally bonkers, but he always said it with a smile. One afternoon, while eating her after-school snack of biscuits and warm milk, Zara received a very important piece of news. Her college, Sunrise Academy, had announced its very first Grand Science and Creativity Festival. Every student could enter a project. The best project would win the Golden Gear Trophy, the most prized award in the whole school. Zara sat up so straight that her biscuit fell on the floor. Bilal, who was sitting nearby, immediately picked it up and ate it. "Bilal, that was mine." Zara cried. "You weren't eating it," Bilal shrugged cheerfully. But Zara didn't even mind. Her brain was already buzzing like a beehive. She needed an idea, a big idea. Something nobody had ever seen before. Something so amazing, so breathtaking, so wonderfully impossible that the whole school would gasp when they saw it. She grabbed her notebook, the purple one covered in sticker stars, and she began to write. She wrote down flying umbrella robot. No, too boring. She wrote dancing bookshelf. No, too simple. She wrote talking calculator. Closer, but still not quite right. Then, just as the last golden light of the evening sun poured through her window and lit up her room like magic, Zara looked at the dusty old toy dragon sitting on top of her shelf. It was a birthday gift from her grandmother, a beautiful dragon with sparkling silver wings and bright blue eyes. And just like that, ping! The idea hit her like a bolt of lightning. A robot dragon! She shouted so loudly that Bilal came running from the kitchen thinking something had exploded. Zara laughed, hugged the toy dragon tight, and immediately started sketching her design. The robot dragon would breathe fire. Well, colorful lead fire. It would flap its wings. It would roar. It would be controlled by a remote. It would be built completely by hand, right here in her very own room. She had exactly 3 weeks until the festival. 3 weeks, a head full of ideas, and a room full of gadgets. There was absolutely no time to waste. The very next morning, Zara woke up at 6 o'clock, 2 hours before school, and immediately started working on her robot dragon. She had already drawn 12 pages of sketches and made a list of every single part she would need. She called her project Draconis, the mechanical dragon. She needed a strong metal frame for the body and wings. She needed servo motors to make the wings flap up and down. She needed RGB LED lights arranged inside the mouth to look like fire. She needed a speaker for the roar. And she needed a microcontroller, a small computer chip, to connect everything together and make it all work with a remote control. Most of the parts, Zara found in her own workshop, in old broken toys, taken apart gadgets, and spare electronics her father had saved from his engineering projects. The rest, she carefully listed and asked her parents to help order online. Every afternoon when she came home from school, Zara would drop her school bag, put on her goggles, and get to work. Building Draconis was harder than she had expected. Much, much harder. On day 3, she accidentally connected 2 wires the wrong way and a tiny spark flew up and singed one of her eyebrows. She looked in the mirror and burst out laughing. "Mum, I have only 1.5 eyebrows now," she called out. "That means you're a real engineer," her mum called back calmly from the kitchen, clearly not worried at all. On day 5, the left wing fell off completely, 3 times. Every time she attached it, it drooped sideways like a wilted flower. She nearly cried the 3rd time. She sat on the floor, stared at the lopsided wing, and ate an entire packet of biscuits while thinking hard. Then she remembered something her favorite science teacher, Mr. Raza, had once said: "If your first design fails, It just means you now know one more way that doesn't work. That's progress, not failure. So she got back up, redesigned the wing joint, used a stronger support bracket she fashioned from a metal ruler, and by midnight, the wing held perfectly. Zara's mum would check on her every night before going to bed. Often she would find Zara fast asleep at her desk, one cheek pressed against a circuit board, surrounded by wires, with her glowing goggles still on her forehead. Every night, her mum would gently take off the goggles, place a soft blanket over Zara's shoulders, and leave a plate of cookies on the table, because everyone knows that cookies make the best midnight fuel for inventors. Bilal, meanwhile, had appointed himself the official chief assistant of the project, a title he invented himself. His actual contributions included handing Zara tools when she asked, making sure nobody disturbed her, drawing a "do not enter" genius at work sign for her door, and eating at least half of the cookies every night. "I am essential to this project," Bilal announced one day, very seriously. "You ate my lunch yesterday," said Zara. "That was research," said Bilal. "I was testing if the sandwich was distracting enough to interrupt your focus." Zara shook her head. But she smiled. Because honestly, even though Bilal was silly, having him around made everything feel a little less scary. By the end of week 1, Draconis had a body. It was rough and unfinished, bare metal and exposed wires, but it was a shape. It had a head, a neck, a body, a tail, and 2 proud wings stretched out on either side. Standing on her work table, it was already about the size of a large cat. Zara stepped back, pushed her goggles up onto her forehead, and looked at it for a long time. "You're going to be amazing," she whispered to it. And somewhere in the circuit board beneath its metal chest, a tiny green light blinked, as if Draconis was already agreeing. Week 2 was the most exciting, and most terrifying, week of the entire project. The body of Draconis was now fully built and painted in a gorgeous shimmering blue and purple. The wings were attached firmly and could flap up and down when the motor was switched on. Zara had added real metal scales made from little pieces of shiny aluminium foil pressed carefully into painted clay, so the dragon looked genuinely beautiful. But now came the hardest part of all, making it come alive. Zara had to write the code, the instructions, that would tell the microcontroller what to do. Press button A, the wings flap. Press button B, the eyes light up. Press button C, and the fire LEDs in the mouth blaze to life in a cascade of orange, yellow, and red light, while the speaker roars like a real dragon. Zara had been learning to code for 2 years, but this was by far the most complicated program she had ever attempted. She sat at her small computer for hours, typing line after line of code. She tested. It didn't work. She fixed a mistake. Tested again. Something else broke. She fixed that. Tested once more. The wings flapped but the fire wouldn't trigger. She fixed that too. Then the roar played 10 times at once and sounded like a blender full of bees. "Bilal, come listen to this," she shouted. Bilal came running, listened to the horrible noise, and immediately covered his ears. "Is it supposed to sound like that?" he asked. "No," said Zara. "But I'll fix it." And she did. On the morning of day 10, a bright Tuesday, Zara stood in front of Draconis, took a deep breath, and pressed button C. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then, WHUMPH. The inside of the dragon's mouth blazed with a burst of brilliant, glowing color, orange fading to red, then leaping to yellow, then cascading through all 3 at once, exactly like real fire. At the same moment, a deep, earth-shaking aria boomed from the speaker, filling the room. And then, as if that wasn't enough, both massive wings spread wide and beat the air up and down, creating a small breeze that ruffled Zara's hair. Zara stood completely still. Her mouth fell open. And then she started jumping up and down, screaming so loudly that her mum came running. Her dad appeared from his study, and Bilal, who had been watching from the doorway, let out a joyful shriek and started jumping too, though he wasn't entirely sure what he was celebrating. "It works. It works. It works." Zara screamed. Her father stood in the doorway looking at the glowing, roaring, wing-flapping mechanical dragon and went very quiet for a moment. "Zara," he said at last, his voice soft with wonder, "you built a dragon." "I built a robot dragon," she corrected him proudly. "Draconis. The mechanical dragon." Her father laughed, a big, warm laugh, and hugged her tightly. "He's magnificent," he said. And Draconis, as if he heard and understood, let out a small, dignified roar in reply. The morning of the festival, Zara woke up at 5 in the morning. Her stomach felt like it was doing somersaults, backflips, and loop-the-loops all at once. She carefully packed Draconis into a large cardboard box lined with bubble wrap, carried it down 5 flights of stairs with Bilal holding one side and her father holding the other, and loaded it into the car. The drive to Sunrise Academy felt both very long and very short. When they arrived, the school was already buzzing with excitement. Students were setting up their projects everywhere. There were erupting volcanoes, solar-powered cars, a working weather station, a greenhouse powered by recycled materials, and a machine that turned salt water into clean water. All of them were wonderful. But when Zara set up her table in the main hall, pulled off the cloth cover from Draconis, and switched on his power, the whole mood in the room changed. First, his eyes lit up, 2 blazing circles of golden light in the middle of all that shining blue metal. Then his wings spread, slowly and majestically, like a bird preparing to take flight, even though he was still on the table. And then, when Zara pressed button C, the fire erupted from his mouth in a brilliant cascade of light, and his great roar shook the air like thunder. Everyone in the hall stopped what they were doing. Heads turned. Eyes went wide. Jaws dropped. For a full 3 seconds, the entire hall was completely, utterly silent. And then every single person burst into applause. Kids came running from every corner of the hall to see Draconis. They pressed around the table 5 and 6 deep, all talking at once. How does the fire work? Can it actually fly? Did you really build this yourself? Can I hold the remote? Zara answered every question patiently and enthusiastically. She explained the servo motors, the LED circuits, the speaker system, the remote control code. She showed them the microcontroller sitting neatly inside Draconis's chest cavity, wired to everything like a tiny robotic brain. Her classmate Hamza, who was the best student in the science class and had never been impressed by anything, looked at Draconis for a very long time without speaking. Then he looked at Zara. "This is the most incredible thing I have ever seen in my entire life," he said at last. "And I've been alive for 11 years. "Thank you," said Zara, beaming so hard her cheeks hurt. Even the teachers gathered around. Mr. Raza, her science teacher, stood at the back of the crowd with his arms crossed and a smile so wide it nearly went off both sides of his face. He had always believed Zara could do something extraordinary. Today, she had proved it. The judges, 3 professors from a nearby university, arrived at 1 o'clock. They walked through the hall slowly, examining each project carefully, asking questions, making notes on their clipboards. When they reached Zara's table, they stayed for 15 minutes. 15 whole minutes. That had never happened at any school science festival before. One of the professors, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, crouched down to look at Draconis directly, as if looking him in the face. Then she straightened up and looked at Zara. "Young lady," she said, "who helped you with this?" "My parents helped me by parts," said Zara honestly. "And my brother ate all my cookies. But the designing, building, and coding, that was me." The professor nodded slowly. She made a very long note on her clipboard. "Extraordinary," she said quietly. The award ceremony was scheduled for 3 o'clock in the afternoon. All the students gathered in the main auditorium. The judges sat at a long table at the front. Parents filled the back rows, craning their necks and whispering excitedly. Each student was to bring their project onto the stage for a final demonstration in front of everyone before the winners were announced. Zara was 5th in line. When her turn came, she walked proudly onto the stage, placed Draconis on the display table, and turned to face the crowd. There were hundreds of people watching. She had never spoken in front of so many people before. Her legs felt like cooked noodles. But she took a deep breath, smiled, and began. "Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zara Khan, and this is Draconis, the mechanical dragon. I built him entirely at home, over 3 weeks, using servo motors, RGB LED circuits, a custom speaker system, and a microcontroller that I programmed myself." She pressed button A. The wings spread, magnificently, powerfully, and a gasp of delight went through the whole auditorium. She pressed button B. The eyes blazed gold and the audience murmured appreciatively. She pressed button C. The fire erupted. The roar thundered. People actually clapped mid-demonstration. Zara beamed. It was perfect. Everything was going perfectly. And then it wasn't. She pressed button A again to demonstrate the full wing sequence, and the left wing only moved halfway, shuddered, and then hung down limply like a broken umbrella. A tiny click-click-click sound came from inside, which meant one thing: the left servo motor had jammed. The auditorium went very quiet. Zara's heart dropped straight into her shoes. She stared at the drooping wing. The click-click-click continued, the motor desperately trying and failing to move. She tried pressing the button again. Nothing. The motor was stuck. Some kids in the audience whispered. One of the younger students near the front started giggling, not meanly, just because it looked funny, like the dragon's arm had gone to sleep. The judges were watching. The professors wrote something on their clipboards. Zara couldn't tell what. Everything inside her wanted to burst into tears and run off the stage. But instead, she breathed. In through her nose. Out through her mouth. Just like she'd practiced when things went wrong in her workshop. She reached inside Draconis's wing joint. She knew every single part of him by heart, and with 2 fingers, she carefully nudged the motor gear, releasing the tiny bit of grit that had jammed it. She pressed button A. Both wings spread wide and beautiful, perfectly in sync. The auditorium erupted in applause, louder than before. One of the judges, the tall woman with silver-streaked hair, was nodding, and now she was actually smiling. Zara stepped back to the microphone. "I should mention," she said, her voice steady despite her still racing heart, "that in real engineering, things go wrong. That's not failure, that's just part of the process. The important thing is that you know your machine well enough to fix it." Mr. Raza, sitting in the second row, burst into applause. Then everyone else joined in. Even the judges. Bilal, sitting next to their parents in the audience, leaned over and whispered to his mum. "That's my sister." He said it the way people say it when they are very, very proud of something. At exactly 3:45 in the afternoon, the head judge, the tall professor with silver-streaked hair, whose name was Dr. Amara Siddiqui, walked to the microphone at the center of the stage. The auditorium fell into a hush so quiet you could have heard a pin drop on the other side of the building. "This year's Sunrise Academy Grand Science Festival," Dr. Siddiqui began, "has given us some truly remarkable projects. Our students have demonstrated creativity, intelligence, and enormous hard work. Every single entry today made us proud." Zara was sitting in the 4th row, squeezed between Bilal and her friend Nadia. She was squeezing her hands together so hard her knuckles had gone white. Bilal was squeezing his own hands too, in sympathy, and also because he had eaten too many of the festival cupcakes and his stomach was not entirely happy. However, Dr. Siddiqui continued, one project stood apart from all the rest. It demonstrated not only technical skill at a level we rarely see in students of any age, but also creativity, persistence, and, perhaps most importantly, the spirit of a true engineer. When something went wrong on stage today, this student did not panic, did not give up, did not make excuses. She fixed the problem, explained the process, and turned a moment of difficulty into a lesson for all of us. Zara felt her heart beating so hard she was sure the people in front of her could hear it. The Golden Gear Trophy for this year's Grand Science Festival goes to... A pause. The kind of dramatic pause that seemed to last about 17 years. Miss Zara Khan, for her extraordinary creation, Draconis, the mechanical dragon. The auditorium exploded. Confetti cannons, actual confetti cannons that someone had cleverly hidden in the ceiling, burst in golden and blue and pink, filling the air with 1,000 tiny stars of color. The music system blared. Everyone was on their feet, clapping, cheering, whistling. Bilal grabbed Zara's arm and shook it. "You won. You won. You won," he shouted directly into her ear. "I know," she shouted back, laughing and crying at the same time. She walked up onto the stage in a sort of daze. The Golden Gear Trophy was placed in her hands. It was heavy and beautiful, shaped like a golden gear with a star in the center that caught the light and scattered it everywhere like tiny suns. Draconis was brought up beside her, and when someone pressed button C and he roared into the auditorium with wings spread wide and fire blazing, the crowd cheered all over again. Dr. Siddiqui leaned down and said something in Zara's ear, something just for her. "I have been a professor of robotics for 22 years, she said. "I have seen engineering students, university students, who cannot do what you have done today. Please, whatever you do, never stop building." Zara held the trophy and looked out of the crowd, at her father's proud face, at her mother wiping her eyes with a handkerchief, at Bilal, who was trying to high-five everyone within arm's reach, at Mr. Raza giving her a slow, deep nod that said everything without any words at all. And then she looked at Draconis, standing proudly beside her on the stage, eyes blazing gold, wings wide, as if he too was taking a bow. "We did it," she whispered to him. And as if in answer, his chest panel blinked once, a single pulse of warm green light, right where his heart would have been if he'd had one. But the story didn't end there. Because that evening, when the family arrived home and Zara sat at her desk with the Golden Gear trophy gleaming on a shelf beside her grandmother's dragon toy, she opened her purple notebook, the one covered in star stickers, and turned to a fresh new page. And at the top, in big bright letters, she wrote, "Project 2. What comes after a dragon? Dragon." Because that is the thing about inventors, creators, builders, and dreamers. No matter how big the thing they just made, they are already thinking about the next one. The Golden Gear sat on the shelf, magnificent and golden. But the best adventure, for Zara, would always be the one she hadn't started yet. And somewhere on the work table, under a pile of new wires and fresh sketches, a small green LED winked in the dark, as if Draconis already knew what was coming next, and couldn't wait.